Right. Good morning, members. Welcome to this digital meeting of the Audit Committee being held via Microsoft Teams on Friday, the 19th of March at 10 o'clock, 2021, 10 o'clock. Just to confirm that this meeting will be recorded and made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images and audio of these individuals present and/or speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council's website. The address is www.caerphilly.gov.uk. Now, if you lose connection during the meeting, please make every effort to reconnect. There is the committee services staff, they are available and will be able to help you to reconnect if necessary. Can I also remind members to mute their microphones, as Brenda just suggested, and to leave their cameras on? Can I ask that officers have their microphones and cameras turned off until they are invited to present their reports or speak on an item? Members and officers should only activate their microphones after the chair has invited them to speak on an item. Today, we'll be using Microsoft Forms within the show conversation for voting on agenda items, where the voting poll will appear and then members are asked to click on yes, no, abstain, and then click on submit vote. Now, Beck, can I ask you, can you take a roll call, please, of the members and officers?
Yes, of course, Chair.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Mike Adams.
Present.
Councillor Liz Aldworth.
Present.
Apologies for Councillor John Bevan and Councillor Carl Cass. Councillor Jean Gale.
Yes,
Apologies and Councillor David Hardacre.
Becky, there's background.
Is that better, Chair?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Colin Mann.
Yeah, present.
Councillor Brenda Miles.
Present.
Councillor Teresa Parry.
Present.
Councillor Margaret Sargent, Chair.
Present.
Councillor Graham Simmons.
Yes.
Councillor Julian Simmons.
Present, Chair.
And our lay member and Vice Chair, Mr. Nigel Yates.
Present.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Would you like the officers to introduce themselves, please, Chair?
Yes, please.
I'll start first then, Chair. Steve Harris, I'm present, and Councillor Stenner did intend to join us this morning, but she's having a COVID jab, so she may be a little late.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, it's Deborah Graham here, acting internal audit manager.
Thank you, Deb.
Good morning, Chair. It's Lisa Lane. I'm here to present the report on the complaints policy.
Thank you, Lisa.
Good morning, Chair. My name's Ros Roberts and I'm here for the training part with Deborah later.
Thank you, Ros. Right, we'll go on to the agenda proper now. The first item is apologies. Now, if anyone is aware of any apologies that hasn't been mentioned, Beck, I think you've had everyone's apologies, haven't you?
Yes, Chair, we had 3 apologies. Councillor John Bevan,
great.
Councillor Cass and Councillor Hardacre.
Okay, we'll move on to declarations of interest then. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the code of conduct of both councillors and officers. Right, may I ask now if you have any declarations, if you could use the hands up function, and Nigel, our Vice Chair, will take note.
No hands up, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We'll go on to agenda item 3 then, which is a review of the corporate complaints procedure and unacceptable behaviour policy. Lisa, may I ask you to present this report, please? Morning.
Morning. Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report this morning is to ask the committee to review and endorse the new concerns and complaints policy, which is attached at Appendix 1 to the report, which is based on the model document issued by the Ombudsman, together with the associated statement of principles, which is attached at Appendix 2, and it's these principles that underpins the complaints handling process. Also, in light of the introduction of the new policy, members are also asked to review and endorse the policy regarding unacceptable or persistent or unreasonable actions by complainants, which is attached at Appendix 3. By way of background, members will be aware that the Council's current complaints policy was adopted by Cabinet in February 2013, and apart from some minor changes, has been in place since that date. In 2019, the Ombudsman gained new powers under the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales Act 2019, which set out a complaints handling process. A Complaints Standards Authority was also created within the Ombudsman Office, which developed standards for dealing with complaints across the bodies within the Ombudsman's jurisdiction. And against this backdrop, last September, the Ombudsman wrote to local authorities to advise that the statement of principles, the model complaints handling process and the guidance were in full effect, and requested that all public bodies reflect on how their own practices and procedures comply with the guidance and how they would ensure that complaints are captured appropriately. All councils have been asked to provide a copy of its updated complaints handling process by the 31st of March 2021. Members will be aware from regular reports on the complaints process that the policy is designed to deal with corporate complaints, and that there are separate complaints processes for school-based complaints and for social services complaints. Members will see from the model complaints process that there's no change to the two-stage approach, and then obviously if a complainant is dissatisfied, they can refer the matter to the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. That said, whilst the actions we take remain the same, there will be greater emphasis on the way in which we record contacts and complaints. The Stage 1 informal resolution process will become more part and parcel of frontline service delivery. Staff will be empowered and trained to recognise a complaint and deal with them as they arise. And to support this change, senior officers within customer services are undertaking a scoping exercise to streamline the process, both internally and customer facing, to provide the customer with a more efficient and focused service. The Ombudsman has offered to provide further training to authorities in the coming year as and when required, and Caerphilly complaints officers have also taken up training with the Ombudsman back in October and recently now in February. The Learning from Complaints group, which include the complaints officers, will continue to meet to review and implement any changes to the current practice as set out in the guidance and the new model concerns and complaints policy. So this will include a review of the way in which we collect data, the methods for learning from complaints, and a means to identify and disseminate good practice. In terms of complaint handling roles, the guidance sets out a requirement for Cabinet to receive regular reports on the types of complaints, the outcomes and any remedies taken as a consequence. It is a matter for Cabinet to determine the frequency. However, it is suggested they receive reports twice yearly. Members will also be aware that as a result of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, the Audit Committee, in its terms of reference, includes a review, the need to review and assess the authority's ability to handle complaints. So it's also proposed in the report that Audit Committee receive reports twice yearly under their terms of reference. I mentioned earlier the Statement of Principles, which is attached to Appendix 2 to the report. It is intended to promote these principles on the Council's website alongside the Concerns and Complaints policy. And then finally, with regard to the unreasonable actions by complainants policy, this policy is rarely utilised, but it does provide support to officers on managing situations when someone's actions are unreasonable and unacceptable. So it's recommended to Audit Committee that this policy is endorsed and published alongside the complaints policy. Chair, I would just ask committee to consider the recommendations of paragraph 3, and I'm happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Now, I noticed you saying that 2013 we last had a copy of this. So in your opinion, do you think that this committee would benefit from the training the Ombudsman suggests?
I think training by the Ombudsman is more aimed at officers dealing with complaints and recognising the definition of a complaint, how to respond. So it's more of a complaints handling role. The Ombudsman wouldn't expect members to get involved in any investigatory aspects of complaints. So I think it's more based around officer training.
Okay, thank you very much. Nigel, may I ask who's next to speak, please?
Councillor Miles.
Councillor Miles, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've only got one question on the policy, and that's on the unacceptable behaviour policy. But I had 3 very small points on accuracy as well. So if I just reel those off first. The first one was on the complaints policy, and it's on page 5 of that policy, which was page 11 in our packs. There's a reference there about halfway down the page under learning lessons. It's a reference to the Audit Committee, and we are in the process of changing the name of the committee to the Governance and Audit Committee, so that'll need updating, I think. And then going on to the unacceptable behaviour policy, on page 24 of our packs, which is under paragraph 4, managing unacceptable conduct by complainants. There's a reference there to when a complainant continues to correspond on a wider angle of issues, and I wondered if that was the right word, an angle of issues. Might want to look at that and see if there's a better, clearer word. So that was on page 24 of our packs. And the final point on accuracy then is on page 25 of our pack, right at the end of the policy under paragraph 9, policy review. The dates haven't been updated on there yet. I presume they will be. So those were just my accuracy points. The question I had then was on page 25 again under paragraph 8, notification to local members. And it says there that when a person has been categorised as under restricted contact, that the local ward members would be informed of this. I just wanted some assurance that it would be more than just informed. It would be maybe some guidance issued to ward members as to how they should then deal with someone who's been categorised as a restricted person, so to speak. I mean, it would jump in my mind then, it would arise, do I then have to, kind of restrict my contact with that person, or do I listen to their complaints as a ward member? So I think as a ward member, and looking at it from my point of view, I'd be looking for a little bit more information than just being informed at that point that there was someone in my ward who was in that category.
Yeah, I think that would depend on individual circumstances for members, and that would be separate advice then would be given on a case-by-case basis, I would imagine. But under this policy, that's what we would advise members in relation to that contact. But obviously members can contact the monitoring officer or myself for advice, at any time should it be necessary.
Okay, that's great.
And taking those points there, Councillor Miles, yeah, I do notice obviously the Audit Committee will be the Audit and Governance Committee, and I'll just check out those other two matters you've mentioned and draw them to the attention of the Cabinet when they receive the report next week.
Okay, thanks.
Who's next?
According to my list you gave me, Councillor Adams is next.
Thank you.
Thank you for noticing that, Nigel. I'd only just put my hand up actually, but it's relating to the question that Councillor Miles has just asked, and it's something that did happen to me. I was contacted by a constituent who had been barred from the Planning Committee over a number of issues. Luckily, I hadn't had previous advice about how to handle a member who had been barred from any contact with the council, but I believe that I handled it to our satisfaction, because when I mentioned it to committee services later, I was advised that yes, I'd followed an appropriate procedure for doing so. So glad of that at the time, and yes, it would be useful for us to be informed and given some advice on how to handle anyone on a prescribed list. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Michael.
Councillor Mann is next.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Thanks, Chair. A slightly different point, Lisa. I note that in the principles that are sent to us by the Ombudsman's Office that number 4 mentions being timely and effective. I couldn't help spring into mind that maybe they could use that advice themselves. I don't know whether as a committee we are permitted to write to the Ombudsman's Office with that observation, but certainly from what I know of the Ombudsman's Office, they certainly don't follow their own advice.
Good point there. Good point there. Next is Councillor Parry.
Sorry, Chair, can we at least ask why things take so long? Because there are on 2 occasions in this advice from the Ombudsman's Office that terminology is used, and they're urging everyone else to do something. And I would hope we were in our rights to ask them why things tend to take so long when it disappears into Pencoed.
Lisa?
My remit obviously is on this corporate complaints policy and the time limits that we comply with in terms of council requirements on the stage 1 and stage 2. I wouldn't be able to offer any comment on the Ombudsman's timelines.
Thank you. Thank you. Nigel?
Miss Councillor Parry next.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Lisa. It still regarding something that we've discussed previously is how some of these complaints are really considered, and going to Cabinet twice yearly. I don't think we as the ward members don't see exactly how, or even on the Audit Committee, how many of these complaints, and I'm referring to the street lights off in particular. I'm plagued with complaints regarding that, and especially now when there's been vigils held for women's safety. I'm wondering how the Cabinet are actually fed these complaints. So my question is, how is your report written, and does it really reflect the complaints that have come in? And then, well, I know you can't answer for the Cabinet, but whether they're just a piece of paper and they've just looked at it and they've disregarded it. But these are real complaints by the public about their safety?
Lisa.
Oh, sorry, Chair, I just missed the last part of the question, but I think I've got the majority of it. Just to explain, Cabinet haven't received reports on complaints to date. The only committee that have received reports since we started the complaints process back in 2013 is the Audit Committee. The annual letter also goes to full council, and the Standards Committee would deal with reports whether they were upheld in respect of the corporate complaints policy. So to date, Cabinet haven't received any reports. So going forward, that's how we'll work as a group, this Learning from Complaints group. We'll work together to work out how we report data, how we can learn more efficiently from the data that we're collecting. And I suppose for all staff to understand what a complaint is, so that we can formulate the data and, you know, maximise our learning capacity from the data that we have. So Cabinet haven't had any reports yet, but they will be formulated now going forward, obviously if these recommendations are accepted. The only reports we've done so far are the reports that Audit Committee would have had, and the figure-led with some lessons learned and outcomes. So we'll develop on what we already have, really, to maximise the value of our complaints.
Yeah, Lisa, but I'm still wondering how, you know, the mechanism for flagging these complaints, they're supposed to be taken to Cabinet. So because they are the decision makers and they can turn over decisions that they've already made. And if that's not happening, this is very worrying. If they're not even getting the data of how many complaints have come in or where the complaints are levied at, you know, yeah, I'm even more worried now, to be quite truthful.
Yeah, I can't comment obviously on specific matters, but even where there are complaints, you know, we may have still made a decision appropriately. So then, whilst there may be a lot of complaints, the decision we've reached may be appropriate, if you like, for the circumstances. So I suppose matters are dealt with on a case-by-case basis. I wouldn't have specific information on exact issues such as street lighting, but obviously, you know, I could take that up with the director and come back to members. But you know, complaints are not always upheld.
Can I ask if Ros could come in here, please? Perhaps she can offer some advice.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add to perhaps Lisa's part. Are you aware that we've got a new performance management framework, and we were going to report to scrutiny and to Cabinet at a high level? Part of that is not just data and PIs, it's about wider intelligence, wider information. And we have a section specifically on complaints, but it's more about the learning. So it might not entirely address the councillor's concern, but we're looking at themes. So I know if there was 100, you know, maybe 50 of them was about something, you know, like streetlights and the trends emerging. And this, I know it's newish, but they're all going to scrutiny, and community scrutiny is next week, and the trends on complaints will be there. The members haven't particularly asked questions on that on this time, but it is a new way of looking at it. So that part will raise trends. We do need to do more on how we collate and trend it, because if you're getting hundreds of information, unless you've got the right software package, then it would take a long time to count. So we're aware that we need to do more on that. And the director, Ed, has put some things in place for people to do some work on different sort of softwares, and could we have one system, because there are different systems of complaint recording around the authority. Understandably, housing have their system, other people have theirs. So we're looking at bringing together one system that will make it easier to collate trends. So I don't think it entirely addresses the councillor's concern, but I just want to say from the performance side, there will be more accurate recording on the trends that are emerging. So whether they're policy decisions or whether they're, you know, something that someone's concerned on a day-to-day basis, they should be able to get that trend data to see if things are rising and what's going on with it. So I just wanted to sort of let you know that additional work was going on.
Teresa, would you like to ask Roz any questions on that?
I'm still so worried how we can affect any kind of change in some of the policies that have gone through if the complaints haven't been collated or fed back to the council or to the cabinet. Perhaps we could have, or do I have to have an FOI to get the number of complaints that we've received regarding street lighting?
But I'm not sure whether that's for this committee.
Can we have, since the introduction of the shutting down of the street lights in the night time, can we have a figure of the complaints that we've received so far?
Is that for this committee, or would this go through to the appropriate committee? The request is there, but would it come back to this committee, or would it?
Well, I think it should come back to this committee so that we have, because we are, and all the complaints have only come to us. They haven't gone to cabinet yet. So I think we're in a perfect position to have this information, and then it will definitely be fed back to cabinet because we would ensure it.
I see what you're saying, Teresa. Perhaps we could discuss this more fully later. But what are your comments, Lisa? Roz? Lisa?
I'm happy to take back comments to the director on the specific matter. As I say, I haven't been involved, so I wouldn't have that information to hand. It's not a matter that I'm familiar with, but I'm happy to take those comments back to the director and feed them back to the committee if that would assist. I don't know if Roz wants to add anything more.
I think that would be really helpful. I know that some of the data that the councillors mentioned is available, in that people do record what the complaint is about, and then they can sift it into, is it a policy, you know, is it as a result of a policy decision? I mean, that's not for the customer, but they have that information there. It is a very labour intensive process to go through hundreds of communications to sort of sift out those trends, which is why, you know, that they were looking at, you know, ways of automating it, or not so much automating, but systems where you can easily filter that information. So I think it would be helpful for Lisa if you could go back, but I know that there is information there, but it's getting it into that format that it's usable and easy to see on a trend basis rather than, you know, individual concerns.
Thank you, Roz. If we could do that then, please, Lisa.
Yeah.
Chair, it's Steve Harris.
Thank you very much. Is that okay with you, Teresa?
Yeah, I think Steve Harris would like to come in, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just to reassure the committee really that the key issues you're raising today obviously will be captured in the report that will go to cabinet. So any of the things you're raising in respect to street lighting, etc., will be reflected in the report that goes to cabinet. So cabinet will be made aware of your concerns through that avenue. And secondly, Lisa, I think it is a good idea if you just raise some of these concerns with the relevant director as well. Then obviously we can come back with some sort of response. But I think what is important is the key issues of today's meeting will be reflected in the report that goes to cabinet.
Lovely. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Rhian.
Thank you very much. Who's next, please, Nigel?
Councillor Mann.
Okay, thanks both. I think I'm right in saying, Chair, that any elected member can actually request to speak at cabinet on a relevant issue. Obviously, whether that request is accepted is down to the chair, who's the leader on this occasion. Probably more relevant to opposition members than the ruling group, because I imagine the ruling group takes things up internally. but I believe that facility is open to all elected members if they wish to take advantage of it.
Thank you, Colin. Next, Nigel.
Councillor Miles.
Thanks. I'm just going back to what Teresa was saying about complaints regarding policy. I think it is an important issue. I think there is, in these documents that we're looking at today, that I'm happy that there is a mechanism in there for making sure that these complaints are brought to Cabinet and are reported back to this committee as well. And then, so I think it's then up to us to decide how we take that forward in greater detail. One of the things that bothers me is not where people complain about a policy change and they're not happy with it and they don't like it, but it's the fact that if we implemented a policy as decision makers and then people were coming to us and highlighting something which may have been an unintended consequence of a policy change that we made, or maybe there would be a trend emerging where a policy that we'd made was having a disproportionate impact on one section of our community than another. And maybe, you know, in hindsight, the policymakers might want to tweak a policy or amend one small part of it so that it was implemented slightly differently. So it's those kinds of issues where I think that's where and Teresa's concern comes in as well, and I'm concerned about as well, is that once we implement a policy as policymakers, we need to be able to revisit that policy and check that it's working in the way that we wanted it or intended it to work. But like I say, in terms of the documents we've got in front of us today, I think the mechanisms are there. It's just how we use those mechanisms going forward to make sure that we do pick these things up. If we, you know, and make sure that we are learning from the complaints that people make to us.
I agree there, and if the twice yearly reports back to audit isn't sufficient, well, we'll have to look into that again, won't we? Lisa, would you like to speak? Your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate really that obviously we will be working with customer services to undertake the scoping exercise to streamline the way we collect data as well, which will assist so that we'll all work from the same information, if you like. So it would be, you know, easier to collate and you know, easier to analyse. But we would, you know, we deal with complaints, and you know, where complaints are raised, they are responded to and reviewed as necessary. So but yeah, going forward, obviously we will, you know, try and, you know, improve the way we report and the way we learn lessons. So yeah, it's an ongoing process really.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nigel.
Councillor Simmons.
Thank you. It's just a quick one in support of Teresa. I think that it's a very, very valid point. We are paying more for less services on an annual basis, and there doesn't appear to be any form of review of the consequence. That can't possibly be the way forward for a modern authority. We have the demonstrations in London. We're hopefully, and I stress, hopefully, on the cusp of reopening the economy, when pubs and clubs, possibly could shut 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and disgorge young females onto pitch black roads. I think it's, I think Teresa and Brenda made very, very valid points, and I think that the information as requested should be made available at the first opportunity, please.
Could that be arranged then, Lisa, please?
Yeah, I'll certainly take the question back to the relevant director.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. Colin, you want to come back in? Or Teresa, Colin, you both your hands are up.
Yeah, only quickly, Chair. I just wanted, I did put a comment in the column, but I just wanted to agree with the previous speakers. I think we do need to have a good look at that and see if it's working and whether we are learning lessons from what is happening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any more questions on this corporate complaints for Lisa, please?
I have no hands up at the moment, Chair.
No hands up. Oh, thank you very much, Lisa. You can step down.
Thank you.
Right, we'll move on to agenda item 4. Updated terms of reference. Oh, no, I've done it wrong again. Got to move and second this report. Can I have a mover, please?
My hand is up, Chair. Councillor Mike Adams, and that's to move recommendations 3.1 and 3.2.
Excellent. Well done, Mike. Thank you.
I'll be the second, Chair, obviously taking into account the discussion we've had.
Of course, of course. Nigel, could I have your vote as well, please?
Sorry, I'm in favour on both motions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, the forms are up if you would like to have time to submit your vote, please.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, everyone. Sorry I got it wrong again. We'll move on to agenda item 4. Updated terms of reference for the Governance and Audit Committee.
Okay,
Deb.
thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Yes, this report is to formalise the updated terms of reference of the Audit Committee in accordance with the changes that will be coming in with the Local Government and Elections Act. Now, as you recall, a detailed report was presented to committee at the last meeting, which gave the details of the changes and the dates in which they would become effective. So what we need to do now is to have changed the terms of reference, to amend them to take account of the changes that will be coming in from the 1st of April 2021. And the revised document is attached at the appendix. So the reason for the report is just to make sure that the terms of reference are compliant with the legislation, that members of the committee are aware of the roles and responsibilities in detail that are now incumbent on them from the 1st of April. And let's just see if there's anything else. Also, I just need to make you aware that there are a few more changes which will be coming in and which become effective next year. So the terms of reference will require to be further updated in line with those, and a further report will be presented to committee in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deb.
Are there any questions or any comments?
I have Nigel who would like to ask a question first, please.
Of course.
Hi, Deb.
Hello.
I thought this would have been reference to the new changes coming in, because this looks very much like what we already got.
Yes, there are only some very small changes in this document, because the main changes regarding the new number of lay members and the composition of the committee and the chairmanship don't come in until next year. So all those will be adopted at that point. So these terms of reference are really to change the name to the Governance and Audit Committee, and also to contain the changes as required to the performance self-assessment process that are coming in now, even though the actual reporting I believe isn't required until next year, but the process actually begins now. If there are any further questions on those aspects, I think Roz would probably be the best person to answer that if that's the case. So yes, these changes are quite minor, really. and the other small aspect as well is what was referred to in the previous report that Lisa presented with regards to the slightly changed responsibilities and powers in respect of complaints.
Nigel, would you like to follow on here?
Yeah, I would have thought that we should be discussing the new changes coming in at an early stage, because it has quite a significant impact on the structure of the committee, and we need to address how we obtain that change.
Yes, that's a good question there. What I would say is that I believe that there's some advice is going to be coming from the WLGA on putting more flesh on the bones of the process. And also I think the authority has set up a working party on the more detailed, granular changes that actually are going to be required, because in respect of the Act in its entirety, because as you're aware, the Act is quite wide-ranging in its remit, covering the introduction of 16 and 17-year-olds into the ability to vote, and a lot of other issues as well. So it is quite wide-ranging. So this particular document is just concentrating on the specific changes that come into effect on the 1st of April. We have to do it because the Audit Committee is a constituted committee of the authority, and therefore, in order to comply with the Constitution, we have to have these changes and get them adopted so that they can go to full council in May, so that obviously the committee is actually is working under the right terms and conditions. And then the more, as you say, the more detailed changes, I think, will need to be discussed in more detail, as I think advice comes from the various bodies and parties that will be working on this as it develops.
Okay, thank you for that. It's a case of watch this space now, then, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so. Yes, definitely.
So we got governance out the way.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Look out for the next one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's all the questions I've got.
Okay.
I think Councillor Adams wants a question.
Okay.
Michael.
Okay. Thanks for noticing, Nigel, and thanks, Chair. My question really is about the mechanism and how much of the changes should we be looking at doing with this committee, or do any of them actually overlap with the timetable showing there, quite a lot actually, into a new committee after next year's elections?
I mean, the performance duties, I think there's an overlap there with the scrutiny committees. Perhaps, Ros, can you come in on that?
Sorry, could you just clarify the question for me?
Yeah, the overlap with the other
overlapping.
committees. I think that's what Councillor Adams was trying to.
That's correct.
Yeah.
How much are we responsible for making sure that gets inherited by a new committee after next year's elections, and with the numbers and positioning of the chair and the constitution of the committee? We will carry on pretty much as we are, but how early on do any new formats have to be in place ready before next May?
There's because the legislation has got different, I think it was about 14 schedules and 170 sections. It hasn't been helped with them all coming in at different dates and at different times.
Yeah.
I know that more information is coming out now about the dates, the implementation dates, which I think would answer that question clearly better. In terms of the performance duty and scrutiny, all it says is it's up to you as an organisation how you choose to use scrutiny. It is just really as broad as that. It's up to you. Involve your scrutiny, but how you do it, up to you. So and that comes into place in May 2022. Yeah. That performance part of it. So we've still got to think that through, what is the best way to do that. So I know that's a bit of an unsatisfactory answer, but we have had a couple of papers through with dates coming through now. So we should be in a better position when the minister has announced the dates of those schedules to look at where there would be overlap or where there wouldn't.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a question of watch this space, but hopefully being able to do as much in preparedness for how the new committee next year will then operate and be formatted properly. Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There are so many building blocks to this. There must be preparation leading up to it. You're absolutely right on that. And that's why we didn't want to think something started next year, so we didn't have to do anything to next year, because that preparation, you're right, is very important with lay people and all sorts of, you know, things that are in the Act.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Deb.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you both.
I got no hands up.
I agree. It's good to start this process so that we could get everything in place for the next, next term. And hopefully now that with what Deb and Ross have said, we'll have some updates coming to Audit during the year. As you will note, this is only for noting. So are there any more comments now? No? Okay, thank you all for your questions. Thank you, officers, for all your help today. And I conclude the meeting.